9:15, right in the middle of Dad's favorite game show. The sound cut off. I winced, but before he could say anything, the set started buzzing and the screen changed, turning the dark living room around us a deep blue. "What's wrong with the TV?" Dad said, leaning forward on his chair, glaring at the set like he could scare it into doing what he wanted. "What'd you do?" "I didn't do anything. It's an emergency broadcast," I said. On the screen, the news anchor looked as calm as ever. "It's just in," he said with that winning smile I could never pull off, no matter how long I practiced. "A prison transport bus has crashed near the state border. Though police were on the scene immediately, one inmate remains unaccounted for." A picture of the man appeared. He was just a normal guy. Dark hair, square jaw, maybe a little uglier than most. I thought he looked a little like my dad. "The inmate is to be considered extremely dangerous. Citizens are advised to remain in their homes, lock their doors, and call the police immediately if they see anything suspicious. Authorities believe the fugitive was injured in the accident and will likely not have gotten far." While he talked, a list of towns started scrolling under him. Sure enough, the little nothing town 10 miles from our house went crawling across the screen. "Shit," Dad said, slowly crushing his beer can. Shit. "Don't worry," I said. "We're way out here in the woods." "What are the chances?" His hand shot out like a snake. The empty can bounced off my head and clattered into the shadows. My dad's way of telling me to shut up. Little house in the middle of the woods. One back-ass road running by it. Owned by an old man and his idiot son. Dad spat. "We're sitting ducks. Easy pickings. He won't know we're out here." "Yeah, you keep telling yourself that, dumbass. Maybe after he's done gutting your old man, he'll keep you around for a pet." Hands on the armrests, grunting and heaving, Dad tried to stand. I ran over to help him. He smacked at me and cussed, but I got him on his feet. "No way in hell. I'm gonna just sit here and let some shithead take my house. Go get my gun." "Dad, you sure you?" "Don't backtalk me. Get your thumb out of your ass and get my gun." I ducked a smack and went to Dad's office. Anyway, he called it his office. It was more of a trophy room. Deer heads, fish and birds mounted on the walls, staring down at me with their black little eyes. In the corner by his desk was the big stuffed grizzly bear, up on its back legs, snarling at the doorway. I never asked him where he got it. I was always a little afraid to. When I was a kid, he'd call me into his office when I'd done something wrong. He'd be sitting at his desk, that bear looming behind him, both of them glaring right at me. Most of the time, he didn't even have to whip me. I'd be so scared of facing him and that monster. His old hunting rifle was in a glass case on the wall, the place of honor. He used to clean it every day, for hours, running his hands over every piece of it. Before she left, Mom used to say he touched that gun in ways he never touched her. Lately, he'd been letting me clean it. Not that he wanted me to have it or anything, only because he had to. I had to do it when he was asleep, though, or he'd just sit there staring at me, that hungry look in his eyes. When I came back to the living room, gun in hand, he was already back in his chair, huffing and wheezing. Just standing up had done him in. "You can't go out there," I said. "It's too dangerous." He snorted. "Dangerous? Shooting goddamn tigers is dangerous. Shooting one man, running around in the woods at night." He spat. The way he was carrying on, I was afraid he'd have another stroke any second, but I didn't know how to tell him that without making him mad. "Let's just stay here, Dad," I said. "The police will take care of it. I bet that guy won't come anywhere near us." He shook his head. "No, you go. Take the gun." A cold shiver went up my spine. "Yes, you moron. You know how to shoot. I taught you, didn't I?" He had, a long time ago. There'd been a couple months in high school, right after Mom left, when he'd quit drinking and yelling. He'd taken me out to the woods and tried to teach me. I was a lousy shot, but the one time I'd managed to hit something, he'd put his hand on my shoulder and smiled. Those days didn't last long. Mom never came back, but Dad sure did. "Yeah, Dad, but I never shot a man before." No different than shooting a deer. Easier, really. Don't move as fast. I felt the weight of the gun in my hand. With every word out of his mouth, it felt Come on, wipe that dumb look off your face. You want to let that son of a bitch kill your old man? Is that it? No. And quit being a pussy and get out there. Long past time for you to grow up, boy. He pulled the tab on another beer can. He tipped his head back to take a long drink. His neck was all skin and bones, and I could see every swallow. His eyes were wide open, still glaring at me, with that hungry bear look of his. I pulled on my coat, hefted the rifle on my shoulder, and stepped out into the night. The woods were pitch black. If anyone was coming from that direction, we'd never see him coming. I shivered a little, thinking about it. I felt a little better looking at the house, seeing that the only light was the TV, and you could just barely see it through the window. Would some crazy guy running for his life see something like that? The road was a little brighter. It was a little two-lane, winding street, the paint fading. Nobody really came this way anymore. When he'd been younger, Dad had yelled at the government to put up streetlights, but they barely worked now too. Most of them were dead, so between every pool of light was a long stretch of darkness. No cars meant it was dead silent, not even the wind blowing. Just my boots crunching through the grass so loud it was like smashing windows. I winced with every step. Which way should I look? I couldn't see anything around me past my own nose. When I stumbled too close to the trees, they seemed to just spring up out of nowhere, looming over me on their back legs, snarling. The grass turned to asphalt under me. I looked around, but didn't see any headlights. Just in case, I moved into the streetlight closest to the house. Looking up the road, I saw 3 more working streetlights, far apart, and beyond them only dark. I hunkered down and wondered what to do. I don't know how long I waited out there. It seemed like hours went by. Every once in a while, I'd look back to where the house should be in the dark and wondered if maybe he'd snuck past me and broken in. Would I be able to hear Dad if he was in trouble? The gun felt heavier every second. I set it down, checked to make sure it was loaded for the 100th time. Dad always kept it loaded, even years after he couldn't go hunting anymore. He used to say it was just in case he ever got sick of that dumb look on my face. I heard something far away. A scraping sound? I tensed, looking everywhere. Nothing. Then I heard it again. Something being dragged. And again, coming from up the road. But when I looked, I couldn't see anything. A lump rose in my throat. My hands shook, the rifle clattering in them. He appeared out of nowhere, out of the darkness and into one of the circles of light. His head was down, staring at the road. He was limping, 1 foot dragging. Even in the cold, I could feel the sweat all over me. I tried to raise the gun. He was coming right toward me. He limped out of the light and vanished again, but I could still hear his foot dragging across the road. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt thick, stuck. I couldn't scream, even if I wanted to. I squinted at the road, looking for some sign of him. There were 2 more working streetlights between him and me. Would he step through another? His dragging step sounded louder and louder. Far away, I could swear I heard Dad growling. In an instant, I saw him again, under the second streetlight. I could see his dark hair and blood on the leg he could barely lift, and now I could hear him grunting with every step. He sounded just like Dad. I must have made a sound. His head whipped up, and he looked right at me. His eyes were huge and wild. He shouted something, not really a word, a cry of an animal. He raised his arms toward me and started moving faster. I choked and stumbled back just as he reached the edge of the light. We both disappeared at the same time. He was grunting louder, wheezing and gasping, and making those animal sounds. His dragging leg came closer and closer. There was 1 more streetlight between us. I raised the gun and tried to aim at the light, but I couldn't stop shaking. Had he seen the gun, would he stay out of the light until he could reach me? His dead leg scraping against the road was the loudest sound I ever heard. It filled the whole world, echoing through the woods. His wheezes turned into growls. I saw him. He came into the light. He looked just like my dad. My hands grew steady. I fired. He crumpled to the ground. For a long time, I couldn't move. I just stood there trying to stop shaking, to control my breathing, to make the world stop spinning. He was just lying there. He'd twisted when he fell, his top going one way and his legs the other. One arm was stretched out the way he'd come, the other covering his... My mind was blank, echoing with the gunshot. Eventually, out of all that noise, I was still shaking, but not with fear. I couldn't stop the smile spreading across my face. I did it. I shot him. He was dead. I thought about Dad, sitting at his desk with that bear behind him. When he'd call me in there, I used to wish the bear would fall, bring those stretching claws and snarling teeth down on top of him. I used to stay awake for hours every night, imagining. When I could feel my feet again, I walked through the dark of the body, lying there in the middle of that circle of light. I'd gotten him right in the chest, but the wound on his leg looked much worse. I used my foot to nudge his arm from his face. I didn't even hesitate. I had to look into his eye. The funny thing was, now that I was looking at him like this, he really didn't look like my dad at all. I wondered how I could ever think he did. I'd have to call the police. They'd want to pick him up probably. I headed back, walking straight to my house. The trees were still there, looming, but I didn't flinch or shudder anymore. Holding my gun, feeling it in my hand, like a part of my arm. I felt like the strongest man in the world. Dad was still in his chair, watching the TV. He'd been going a little deaf lately, so I guess he didn't hear the gunshot. He looked at me with his beady little eyes, but before I could tell him, before I could finally show him who I really was, he said, "I hope you enjoyed your little camping trip, idiot. You missed the whole damn thing." The anchor was on the screen again. Dad turned the volume up, as in taken into custody. None of the hostages were harmed, and police were able to arrest the fugitive without injury. However, witnesses say that one hostage escaped on his own after sustaining a leg injury. He was last seen fleeing down a back road into the woods. Rescue workers are on their way now. I was laying in bed on a stormy night. At the time, I was 10 years old, so I was extremely scared of thunderstorms. This night made that fear permanent. I was almost asleep until I heard a distant giggle from outside. I got out of bed to look out of my window thinking my younger brother was crazy to play in the storm. But when I pulled back the curtains, I saw a small human figure running in circles out in the field. I froze and just watched until it stopped and looked in my direction, then started running my way. I jumped back in bed and hid under the covers. A few moments later, I peeked above the covers and my room was still pink and empty. I relaxed a bit, but had the urge to look out the window again. So I got out of bed again, pulled back the curtains, and saw complete darkness. Then a bolt of lightning lit up the field, and I saw a group of small faces at my window, staring right at me. They had blood streaming down from their eyes and mouth. One of them opened their mouth to show me the razor-sharp teeth he had. Like an idiot, I stood there and stared until they started beating on my window. I jumped back in bed and hid under the covers and tried to fall asleep. It was hard because they just kept banging on my wedding until an hour later. They stopped. There was no way that I was going to look out the window again, so I finally passed out relieved. The next morning, I woke up remembering the terrible nightmare. Just for laughs, I thought I looked out the window, so when I pulled the curtains back, I screamed. There were little handprints all over my window. There it is again. What is that thing? I can't take this anymore. It's like everywhere I go, all I see is this horrible, tall, thin, and seemingly faceless creature. It's been haunting my dreams as well ever since I first saw it. All it does is stand there and watch. I can't shake this constant feeling of being watched. It's like I'm never alone. I hate it. I can't sleep. I can't go outside. And I can't function as a normal person anymore without it being there. I've done a lot of research on it the last couple of days, Googling what I can best describe it as. All I could remember was it being an impossibly tall, thin man. I say impossibly because no human could be that height and that thin. It's just not goddamn natural. I tried my best to remember its face. I figured that would help narrow the search, but there wasn't one. I have no memory of seeing this thing's face. It was always just a blur, But then I could never look at it long enough without feeling uneasy. I usually just walked in the other direction or something. Or if it was a dream or a nightmare at that, I would always wake up before I could get a clear look. Well, the search provided me with something called the Slenderman. What the fuck is a Slenderman? I've not left my house in 2 days. I've been held up reading all these Slenderman stories and accounts. Needless to say, sleep has eluded me for the duration. Nothing's going right anymore. I think I've angered it by not letting it in my dreams. I keep hearing banging on the windows late at night and creaking of the floorboards as I'm lying in bed. I know they say houses do that on their own, but this is different. The creaks aren't that of the house settling. There's weight behind them, like soft footsteps. However, every time I go to look, there's nothing there. But when I re-enter my room, I always get the sensation I'm being watched. Tell me, have you ever been sitting in a room by yourself, windows and door closed, when suddenly the door opens for no reason? I think everyone has, but I'm different. I swear it's not the draft. I've had all the windows locked for about a week now. I'm not one to believe in ghosts or anything of the sort, but this just has an eerie feel to it. Whenever the door spontaneously opens, it gets noticeably colder in the room. The second I leave the room, however, all the other rooms are back to normal, so it's not like my thermostat's on the brink. Any room, however, except my own. My room has been getting cold recently, real cold. I've resorted to lighting candles all around the room to try and heat up the place. I don't know what's happening. I'm starting to lose it. I went outside for the first time in over a week today. I thought maybe my delusions were coming from being cooped up and spending too much time scaring myself reading about the Slender Man. I went through my day-to-day life as best I could, and to my surprise, no sightings of that thing. Everything was going fine. In fact, I was starting to forget about the whole thing. I was walking through the woods, trying to take in as much fresh air as possible before I went home, when I stumbled across a piece of paper lying there on the middle of the footpath. I'd normally have just written it off to be some litter left by someone, but it was crisp white. It looked like it had been carefully placed there, no longer than perhaps 20 minutes ago. I picked it up and turned it over. It was a drawing of that thing, the Slender Man. A very crude sketch depicted him with the words, "No, no, 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 no," scribbled down the sides of the page. As I tried to decipher the page, the clouds quickly darkened, turning to a heavy black. I best get home, quick before the rain hits, I thought to myself. Now I'm home, sitting staring at this fucking picture, going out of my mind, trying to figure out just how it got to where it was, thinking about how new it looked and wondering what sick fuck drew this and left it there for me. I'm just gonna go to bed. I'd be as well to get some sleep. I swear that picture's cursed. Slenderman was in my dream again last night. It seemed so real. I was lying in my bed in a dream, and I had woken up and seen him standing there, in the corner of my room. I tried to scream, move, do anything, but I couldn't. I lay there, frozen in fear, wondering what would happen. He just lifted his arm and stretched it a good tenth to the headboard of my bed and rested his hand. Say hand, but they didn't feel like hands, more like tendrils over my eyes, and I went back to sleep. When I woke up, there was nothing. What a fucked up dream. Oh, and you know what else has been happening since I brought that picture home? My electronics have been fucking up. My laptop shuts down on its own, even with full battery. My TV randomly turns to static. My phone keeps getting no reception, along with the opening of doors. The constant sound of footsteps at night. You get the picture. I'm burning it tonight. I'm taking out the back and setting the fucker alight. No. No. This can't be happening. I watched that get burned last night. I took that piece of paper outside last night and watched it burn. How can it be back? What kind of twisted bastard would put a duplicate copy through someone's mailbox? This really isn't funny. I can't even phone for help because my electronics won't stop acting up, and I'm too paranoid to leave the house. I don't know what to do. Things are getting too much to cope with now. Day after day, more and more of those damn pictures keep coming through. Nothing works in the house, and I keep thinking I'm seeing him in the house. Whenever I leave the room, I think I catch a glimpse of him in my peripheral vision, or in the corner of a mirror I pass by. It's driving me insane. Has this thing really invaded my home? If so, there's no safety to be had. If it can get me here, it can get me anywhere. Doesn't mean I won't go down without a fight, though. Okay, I've locked my doors and all the windows and took enough food and water from the kitchen to last me about a week. I'm gonna hold up in my room for as long as possible. I don't feel safe outside, nor do I feel safe in my own home. This is my last resort. I know he's got something sinister in store for me. I just know it. Why else would he go to such lengths to scare me to the brink of my sanity? Well, I barricaded myself in my room for now. Nothing's getting in here without my say-so. It's getting late. I'm gonna try and get some shut-eye. Shit. What was that? I swear I heard something move. It must have, because it woke me up. This is no ordinary footstep that I heard at the beginning of all this. Oh no, that was a loud and deliberate thud. It must be messing with me. The Slenderman knows I'm here. I would get up out of bed to turn the light on, but there's no point. He's been messing with the electrics. I lay here scared out of my mind, staring into total darkness. I know this sounds crazy, but have you ever seen a darker shade of black that normal? Like when you're in a dark room with only a little light and everything casts a shadow, but some shadows seem darker than the others. I swear, even though I'm currently in near blind darkness, that corner is darker than the rest. It's the same corner that was in my last nightmare. It's like the darkness is moving. My night vision is getting better now. I can see in a little more detail. Oh no. No. I can see the outline of a man form in that corner. A really tall, thin man. It looks like he's wearing a suit. Oh God. It's him. He's here just like in my dream. I lay here frozen in fear, wondering what's gonna happen. He lifts his arm and stretches it across my room and over to my head. He rests his hands. No, these aren't hands, these are tendrils on my forehead. I thought about grabbing his arm and trying to push away, or getting up out of bed and trying to break down the door, but something told me there's no use. Nothing would help me now. His tendrils grew in length and snigged down my entire body, slowly wrapping themselves around me into some sort of blackened cocoon. Before I could scream, the blackness reached my face and covered my mouth. As it enveloped my head, the last thing to be covered was my eyes, which were firmly shut the whole time. I decided to open them one last time. I looked directly up and he was there, standing directly over me, looking down. That was the last thing I saw before the darkness claimed me. Although he has no face, I swear, he seemed to smile. I was 6, maybe 7 years old when this happened. My family had just gotten back from visiting my aunt's house. My cousins were watching a scary movie in the basement, and even though my parents said I would get scared, I snuck downstairs and watched some of it. I don't remember what part I saw, but there were little monsters with teeth that would eat people in their sleep. When we left for home, it was dark outside, and my parents scolded me for watching that movie. I secretly hoped they would keep scolding me, because I was feeling sleepy and didn't want those things to eat me. We got home fine, and my parents even managed to calm me down enough to the point where, when my bedtime came around, I could go to sleep. I fell asleep almost immediately and slept pretty well. I woke up sometime during the night. Knowing where everything is in my house, I didn't turn the lights on, but instead used the street light coming in the windows. I went to the bathroom and then got a glass of water. As I was putting the glass in the dishwasher, something pricked my hand. I pulled my hand back and switched on the lights, but there was nothing in the dishwasher. I looked at my hand, and it had 4 little indents on the top and bottom where something had broken through the skin. Since that day, I've had little bumps on my skin where the marks were, and I always remember to turn the lights on. These bizarre instructions were found etched into the wall at the bottom of an old well, somewhere in rural Germany. They have been translated to the best of my abilities. Somewhere in Europe, there is an empty field of grass. Amongst the long, unkempt grass is a wooden hatch in the ground. The hatch guards an old storm shelter, but this is not your destination. In order to gain access to the alternate opening, you must spill your own blood over the doors. You will awaken at the edge of field. The doors will now be made of rusted iron. You may now enter the hatch. There will be a long, narrow shaft stretching deep into empty darkness. You must climb down a ladder fixed to the northern wall, keeping your eyes upward at the opening. If you are to glance downward into the darkness, then return your gaze upward. You will find yourself away from where you started. If you look any longer downward, the echoing sound of someone climbing up the ladder will reach your ears, and a rotten, weather-beaten version of yourself will pull at your legs until you fall. After an undetermined amount of time climbing down, your feet will reach a floor. Keep facing upwards. If you look at your feet, there will be no floor. You must now choose your path. Left. Reaching into the darkness to your left, you will feel a cold metal plate mounted on a concrete wall. Keep your hand on this plate. Within the course of 10 minutes, it will rise to an excruciating heat and your hand will be burned. Do not remove your hand until the plate cools once again and lights click on. You will find yourself in a long corridor. There will be a door corresponding to each year of your life on both sides. At the opposite wall will be a door marked present. If you enter this door, you will find yourself ahead in your life to 3 minutes. You must find the door marked with the year that you found most fortunate. Should you pick the wrong door, you will relive that year, but every space in which you did not stand will be torn away to reveal fire beneath. When the year finishes, you will be back at the door, as if you had not opened it. If you are to pick the correct year, you will enter an enormous space of undetermined size. Darkness will surround all but a straight line through the room. The door behind you will cease to be there. If you check behind you, you must follow the lit path through this area for 100 minutes. Along the way, you will regularly encounter loved ones trapped in rusted metal torture devices. They will beg and scream for you to help them. You must ignore their pleas and keep moving. If you help even one of these people, the exit door will vanish and never reappear. Should you reach the end of this area, there will be a scratch door with your name engraved upon it. Enter this door and you will awaken in the storm cellar, the original form of this place. You may now leave. Right. Reaching to the wall on your right will yield different results. You will feel a warm, moist wall of soft flesh. Keep feeling around until you feel a hole in the wall. Plunge your hand into it. After 30 seconds, you will be bitten and blood removed from your wound. Keep your hand there until the pressure stops. Your eyes will suddenly adjust to light you never noticed before. You may turn around. You will see a long corridor paved with pulsing skin, flesh, and muscle. On both sides of this corridor, you should see torn openings that stretch inwards deeply. Cool air will gently flow from each opening rhythmically, as if it is at the end of the hallway. You will see a door marked with your mother's name, awkwardly incorporated into the wall of flesh. Never enter this door. You must look for the opening from which hot air is breathed. If you enter the wrong opening, the tunnel will never end, and you cannot return. Should you enter the correct opening, the tunnel will become gradually wider and more humid. It will be hands pushing through from both sides, stretching the wall, trying to reach you. Keep away from them and do not turn around. Every so often, you will find an ideal sex partner sitting in the center of the tunnel. They will beg you to stay with them. Ignore them. If you stay with them, they will devour you. After 100 minutes in this place, you will reach a hole leading to a far narrower tunnel. Enter this hole and crawl as fast as you can. The hands can now reach you and will caress you gently from behind the thin flesh. If you stop, they will drag you down. As you progress, the light will gradually fade and your heartbeat will become louder until it reaches an almost deafening volume. Open your eyes. You will be lying in the fetal position on the floor of the storm shelter. You may now leave. If you chose the left path, you will receive complete financial security until you die, but your hand will throb painfully once a day. If you choose the right path, you will be considered popular and charismatic by everyone you meet, but you will be plagued by nightmares of the tunnel. If you attempt this ritual twice, you will never awaken from those nightmares. You're the manager for a small store. You hired one of your friends, and you just found out that he's been stealing from the register, stealing stock, abandoning his post to visit with his girlfriend in the back room while he's the only one on duty, and the argument you had with him at the office just didn't settle it for you. You pound on his door. When he opens up, he goes pale, soils himself, and staggers back. It doesn't impress you. Really, you figure he just thinks you're showing up with the cops, until you step through his door and glance to the side, where you get a good look at yourself in the mirror. Or at least, the parts of you that are still recognizable after that shotgun blast that your friend gave you at the end of that argument. Welcome. I'm Atlas. Here at Scaredy Cat Storytime, we dive deep into the shadows to bring you the most bone-chilling stories. Subscribe and be part of our eerie adventure. But remember, once you're in, there's no turning back. His parents had just moved to a new house in the suburbs. Billy was eager to move in and get his own room. He picked the bedroom with the big window that looked out into the backyard. The family quickly got their stuff moved in and then went to bed. The first night that Billy slept in that room, something very strange happened. In the middle of the night, Billy was awoken by strange moans and screams. They seemed to be coming from outside. Billy shouted for his parents, and a few seconds later, they burst into his room. "What's wrong?" asked his father anxiously. "There's something in the backyard," Billy exclaimed. His parents checked and found nothing. They reassured Billy that there was nothing there and sent him back to bed. The next night, Billy heard the noises again. This time they were louder. Billy got the courage to look outside. As he peeked through the curtains, he saw 3 shadowy figures standing in the backyard. They were glaring back at him with glowing red eyes. The figures seemed to point at him as they moved closer to his window. Billy rushed into his parents' room and woke them up. He told them about the figures outside, but when they got up to look, the figures were nowhere to be seen. His parents told him that he must have been dreaming, and he reluctantly went back to bed. The next night, he heard the noises outside his window again. When he turned over in bed, he was horrified to see a bony, skeletal face staring at him through the window. In one hand, it held a long, sharp knife. It was scratching at the window with its other hand. Trembling with fear, Billy quickly put his head under the covers. When the scratching finally stopped, Billy jumped out of bed and cautiously peeked out through the curtains. The 3 figures had disappeared. Instead, there appeared to be 3 freshly dug holes in the backyard. The next morning, Billy's parents decided to call the police to try to make sense of what had happened the night before. The police informed them that years before, 3 psychopaths had escaped from the local insane asylum. They had gone on a rampage, killing anyone they came across and terrorizing the whole town. The previous owner of the house had caught the crazed psychopaths trying to break into his house through the bedroom window. He killed the psychopaths and buried their bodies in the backyard. The police said that the 3 bodies were still buried there.